Okay, so wow, boom. All right, oh, we're live now, so that's good news for everybody. Yeah, let's get back to that what we were just talking about because we were off camera a few minutes just to get everything technically ready. And so it's Christophe Clugston, Ken O'Neill, and Stan Brooks. You know us better as the guys who survived Combat JKD with Mike Sandlin and came out as instructors, the only three that there are now. Anyway, so that's what it was leading into. I was asking Ken a question, and we can just do it now. And that question was, how? What was your training like with Mike? What was your personal, regimen or schedule or whatever, the whole program basically, and then how did it change? Where are you at now?
Good question. Okay, so the way it worked out for me was, I'm going to guess, and Stan can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I remember this is my situation was probably one of the most unique at the time, because when I started in 73, yeah, with Stan, the way it went was, I've told this story before, but I was in a library at SIU Edwardsville, where I was in college, and I'm up in a library and I hear this banging sound, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And I go over to the stairwell. I finally figure out it's echoing up a stairwell. And I look over and I'm like, man, there's this skinny little black dude and he's kicking this huge football dummy that's hanging by a chain from the steel banisters on the bottom of the stairwell in the basement. And I'm like, holy that's Bruce Lee's sidekick. That's Bruce's sidekick. I remember running down the stairs, go down the basement. I knew where he was. I run back there and I'm like, I don't know if you remember this, but I sure do. I ran up to him and I said, that's Bruce Lee's sidekick. And you looked at me like, how did you recognize that? Right away, man, instant chemistry. We clicked right off the bat, and one thing led to another. And I don't remember details right at that point, but I remember somewhere in there, Stan talked to Mike, and Mike told Stan it was okay to go ahead and start teaching me. And Stan, what I don't remember though, just to throw this in there, I don't remember the gap. I don't know if you do, from that day that I met you to the time that I had to go down and meet Mike at Lily Freeman, which we've talked about that machine gun story. But do you remember how long it was, like how fast it was that he said it was okay for you to start me going? Do you remember at all?
Well, no, it's going to be a wild guess on my part. I'm thinking it may have been about 8 months to maybe a year, because I remember one thing that Mike said when he first saw you moved. Mike made the comment and said, Stan, he looks like you. So that was the influence. So I think it would have took at least about 8 months, maybe to a year to get you to kind of, look like me. You haven't found yourself yet, but that's the same thing with me and Mike, I copied Mike until I, found my own way.
Oh, but back up even before that. How long from the day I met you to the time that you even talked to Mike and asked him if it was okay to start training me? Do you remember that?
I think it might have been after I started training you a couple of bit. I think we had some training sessions before I even met Mike.
Wasn't it like within a few weeks or so?
Yeah, I would say maybe a few weeks, maybe a month,
Yeah, it wasn't long. Right. That's right. Yeah. So okay. So that's good. That's just kind of good to get that in there, I think. So my thing was unique because I guess, Stan, was I really your first JKD student?
Oh, yes.
That's what I thought. I thought I was, right. So this is interesting. So really, it started a little different because initially Stan's training me, and then yeah. So you're thinking 8 months or so. Yeah, it's probably right about the time before Mike finally took a look at me, which it's so funny. So really, my thing was unique, just like each one of us was, right? Because it's not like I was going to these classes every week with Mike. Mike had Stan training me, and then I would go periodically, and Mike would check me out, and he would do weird things, like I've said in other talks. He would do weird things. He didn't do stuff like, it wasn't like throwing desks at me and weird stuff like that. Most of the time, what I remember, I wish we had all this on video, he would set up, it was like I've said before, it was more like scenario training, he cued in, like he would set up a situation. Sometimes he would just verbalize it. And then we wouldn't always act it out. And then he'd say, well, what do you think you'd do here? What do you think you'd do there? Then we would start acting out stuff. He'd line up, have guys circle me and do stuff. And, you know, it was like that. I mean, that's the best way I can frame it. Mike really didn't spend much time with me as far as like, okay, let me see your, you know, how you throw, you know, combinations of this, that, or let me see your pop set. Because he would see it within the little things he would set up. And that's all he had to see to know, right? Then I know he'd go over, because he'd go over there and he'd be standing there talking to Stan while I'm doing stuff. I'm like, he's probably telling this guy to slit my throat and throw me in a river or something, and I'm never going to make it, you know. But I never knew for sure what he was saying. But I know he's telling him, well, you need to do this with him. You need to do that, you know. I mean, I could feel that's what was going on. But it was kind of cool because it was different, you know. And then Stan would go off and spend months with me again, or weeks or whatever. I don't even know the gaps in there that I'd have to go see Mike again. So in essence, I mean, that's what it was. There was a lot of freestyle, focus mid training. We had the eventually we had the air shield, the old air shield with a car inner tube in it, and we were refining that Junfan sidekick. And there was a lot of sparring, a lot of limited sparring, full sparring, light touch sparring. I mean, it was a lot of moving around. You know, it wasn't. Stan would drill me, you know, a lot. Like we'd do a lot of, you know, pop style, trap, tap, 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 combination stuff, all that. And I remember Stan, it may have even been our very first class. I bet it was. Could have been. We were outside behind either the science building, behind the library, outdoors. And when you first started training me, Mike was still using a lot of like the old Mantis style Kung Fu.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, you know.
Yeah.
Because a lot of his situational training and a lot of his setting up, you know, challenges in terms of real life, simulating real life conditions for combat. A lot of that came from Mike's previous training. So when Carl brought back the fundamentals of the Junfan that he learned from Guru Inosano, Mike still maintained the two balance. So he had a very good balance at that time between the old and the new.
Yeah. That's a good point. So yeah, it was pretty cool because we didn't do that for long. I remember there was like those little like half-back spin kicks that were real quick, and there was a lot of, you know, Manta style deflections, which I, to this day, every now and then when I'm fooling around with my guys, I'll start doing that, and they're like, what the hell are you doing? I don't know how to get past it. You know, it's really comical. Those things, they're still in you, you know, somatic learning, their pathways are there. It still comes out sometime, and it's really funny because we didn't even do that long, but you must have drilled me pretty good because it's still in the muscle memory, you know. So there was that. But like I said, it was a lot of footwork, a lot of sweating and moving around, and a lot of timing work. And it was, you know, it was all combative work. You know, it wasn't. We didn't really spend a lot of time on the fitness thing. I mean, I was a fitness junkie back then, and I know Stan used to do 1 million push-ups a day and all kinds of stuff. You know, we didn't really incorporate that into our workouts too much, but they would get pretty intense aerobically, you know. So for me, that was kind of that. Now, you know, gosh, I mean, this could be a conversation for hours, but to make it short, what I did, and you know, I was looking around. One of the things that hit me, that was an experience that I had before I met Stan or Mike, was a few years before that. You know, I started off in high school wrestling. That was my first martial pursuit. I was mediocre at best. My first year, I was terrible. I would say going into I never really found out that well in my second year because I trained my ass off over the summer. I was doing road work, you know, long distance, sprinting, and I got a couple guys from wrestling class, and we would go at it. And when I came into that season, I was strong and I was in shape, and I was whipping guys in our own, you know, team that I couldn't even touch when school ended because I had gotten my stuff together. But before the first meet ever happened, I got a call from the YMCA where I'd had put my name in a long time ago to get into a scuba class. And I dropped wrestling like a hot potato and went right for the scuba class. So, but then about 6-7 months later, my schedule worked out and I went to my first karate classes. And that's when I had an experience that solid grappling skills can thwart people in arts that are strictly stand-up arts. I had an experience with a guy much older and more experienced and much faster than me, but getting in that little teeter step wrestling thing and faking a little bit and going in for a single leg takedown off a kick, I found out, wow, wait a minute, there's a problem here. That mentality, and looking at Bruce Lee and how adaptable he was, was kind of what opened my mind. And then here I run into Stan, and then, you know, he just accentuates that whole concept, that discovery. So where this ties back into what I was saying is that the whole time while we were training and working the Combat JKD, I still kept thinking in the back of my mind about, you know, grappling and throws and stuff. We did some, and we didn't do a lot of that, but we did some, and they were decent. But I always had that in my mind, and then one thing leads to another, and I run into a guy from Webster Groves, Missouri, Will Reed, who's very well known in Japan. He's an Aikido practitioner. So I started taking classes with Will Reed. This was in '78, so that was about 5 years after we got started. So I started integrating Aikido and training Aikido while I was training the JKD, and Stan used to come to some of those Aikido classes now and then. And so that became a theme for me. I kept trying to find other things to integrate. I was trying to apply the philosophy, right? To try to kind of fill in areas that for me personally, I felt like I needed to add to, okay? So Aikido became a big part, but I immediately started modifying my Aikido, right? And then, you know, since then I directly went out and through Jay D'Amato's CMAA in '82. That's when I first went out, and I spent immersed time with Dan and Asano at the CMAA camps in Irvine. Came back with my first Kali sticks, and Stan and I jumped in on that. And then shortly after that, Stan, I don't know if you remember, but wasn't long after that when Carl came back. And he says, oh, because somewhere along the line, he found out that I went out there and that we were doing the stick stuff. And then he started coming to some of my classes that we were doing at the rec center at St. Louis University. So then the FMA aspects began to come into play. And, you know, that became a major influence, of course. And then as we started working out with other guys, and Jay decided after we had the California Martial Arts Academy here in St. Louis, because I was working for St. Louis University full time, that we should open a school. Well, somewhere just before that, and this part I don't remember exactly, we're going to have to talk to Ron. Somewhere in there, you and I met Ron Smith. And we even worked out upstairs before CMAA was CMAA. It was Bruce Albach's Kaju Kembo. You, Ron, and I were working out informally. We were doing knife work. We were doing all kinds of stuff. I don't know if you remember that for a short period. Yeah. Okay. You remember. Yeah. Before CMAA became a real thing. So then here's Ron, you know, what, if not the first, one of the very first Americans trained by a Thai coach in the U.S., who then went and fought pro in Thailand. And so we had Ron in CMAA. Stan and I were doing the JKD. We had my God, we had Aikido people in there. We had a point fighting big shot named Terry Kramer. We had Jarrett Whitaco, who was a solid known Wing Chun guy. We had all these things under one roof. So I was able to find some resources through all that. Then we get this guy out of left field named Ron Harris who comes in, right? And he's studying with Leo Gahi Jr. So boom, I start working out with Ron during the days a lot. Then eventually Ron started a nighttime thing, which that's when you were in there, was in the evening classes with Ron. So I started blending in things that I liked from the Pikiti Tertia, you know, which I found a lot of it to be very solid combatively and fit in with JKD mentality. So the point of telling you all this is that I had access to a lot of other stuff without having to travel 1,000 miles. You know, I had resources with these other instructors that I was able to start cross-training with, applying the JKD philosophy. I started around that time. Eventually, after a few years, I started to gravitate away from Dan and Asano's approach, just because I felt that it was overwhelming and it was too many different aspects of too many systems, and I wasn't interested in that, because I mentioned this last talk, because of my experience and my feedback from my students. A lot of these guys were looking for a stripped down, really solid, you know, well, how do I just pick up a lever and go at it? What's a good solid way to train that? What's a good way to deal with, you know, work with knives? And, you know, so I just started, and I yelled right away, elbow and knee work especially. And I drilled and drilled and drilled that Thai round kick till I could puke. And I could break legs with that thing. I promise you, I'm not exaggerating. I had that. I threw out the Junfan side kick at that point. I went all Muay Thai with the round kicks and the push kicks, elbows and knees. And I started really to super evolve for me personally at that time. That was, for me, I would say, the beginning of O'Neill JKD, because that's when I very consciously started to integrate elements and really started super stripping down the Aikido takedowns, so they'd work really close quarters, you know, for me. So then, you know, some years later, a few years later, after teaching and working with this stuff, even after I officially left CMAA, here comes Jay D'Amato again. He goes, oh, I'm training with Hickson Gracie. And I'm going out and training with Machado's out in California. So before you know it, you know, Jay's over in one room and he's teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm in the other room with my guys. And then one thing leads to another. I start training with Jay and his guys like 3 and 4 nights a week. This went on for a couple of years, and I immediately started incorporating the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into my classes to round out, you know, groundwork. And then that became the next big phase in my evolution as far as integration, until 7 years ago when one of Stan and I's mutual students, Bill Thomas, comes to me and says, man, you got to see some of what the Russians are doing. So that became like the next big integration for me. And I finally feel like after all these years, I think I have enough information to cover the wheel of a complete wheel of plugging what for me were certain holes I needed to plug in my own personal way to get what I need to have enough material now for about 3 or 4 more lifetimes. So I could get into more details about how and what I train with that, but I think it's probably time for Stan to do the same thing. Tell us what happened for you, your first experience with Mike training back then, and then lead it up to now when you came back to training.
Well, I'll tell you, we want to leave some time for Christophe as well.
Yes.
But and then Ken, we ought to devote one episode just for you because you got a lot of wide experience. But you know what, at this point in my time, you know, you go through a lot of transitions and changes, you know, particularly as you learn more. So I give a lot of credit to what Mike gave me. Mike taught me on so many different levels, not just me, but he taught not physically in terms of hardcore street fighting, but he taught the psychology of fighting. He taught the fear of fighting. The emotional component was there. So this is why when I trained with him, I noticed that there was something unique that he offered that I didn't see any of the other teachers that were giving articles in, like Black Belt Inside Kung Fu. So I was practically begging him, because at that time he was very articulate. He was highly creative, very intelligent, and he could actually verbalize, you know, exactly in an intelligent, you know, orderly fashion, his concepts and his principles, which was based on actual street fighting experiences. So I thought that he really had something unique that he could offer to other people, but he just wasn't interested at that point in time in his life. But when I kept learning in martial arts, I came upon a lot of different realizations. You mentioned the fact that we studied Aikido together a little bit. But when I studied about 4 months with you with Will Reed, I noticed after that 4 months, my Jun Fan sidekick improved about 70%, although I did no kicking at that time.
Yeah.
So this is what Guru Inosano says, you know, you want to have a sort of a comprehensive understanding of what martial arts is. Either your involvement could be as a student, pure student, or that of an instructor. But most people are like a combination of both, because you can be a student, but you're going to need somebody to train with, and you're going to find somebody that needs to be taught. So you're going to possibly, you know, have that link, you know, student/instructor. So, you know, as an instructor, you want to be able to have a liberal approach so you can have them study Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, because they may find something in that that you didn't find. They might find something in it that works for them, whereby it didn't work for you. And a lot of that too is just based on preference. Sometimes you don't like a thing that has nothing to do with the functionality. It just doesn't fit your character, either psychologically or maybe your body type.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to restrict your students to explore that. So this is some of the inherent wisdom that I really came to me with Mike, but really Guru Inosano really honed that in. And that way you can navigate through many different martial arts and still have an understanding of the principles in that art. And my encounter with Mike, he tested every level. He tested you on the physical level, the emotional, and the mental level, because he wanted you to pass a certain standard in order for him to teach you. He did not want to waste his time. So it wasn't that, again, I wasn't the best guy in class, okay? But I think what gave me an advantage is that I was willing to acknowledge my limitations, my weaknesses, and I would listen. So I think he appreciated that I didn't argue with him. I didn't put up any resistance, you know. He led the way and I followed the way. So in terms of details, well, Ken, you brought that up. He would set up scenarios, you know, multi-man scenarios are very important for him because his Kung Fu originally was designed to fight more than one person. Also was designed to fight if you're in a bar or if you're in an alley or anything in your environment that could be used. Also, the psychological component was used in it. So he had a various, way of putting you in situations where you had to think, oh my God, how do I get out of this? The technique was the least thing it was the least in the list of priorities. That was the last thing. First thing was that were you creative enough to use what was in front of you? For instance, you may have you fight two people on your right and left. Two people in front of you, one on your right side, the other on your left side. And there's a desk in between the two. Okay. Now, the guy to your right comes at you. So you go to the guy to your right and you start fighting, but the guy to your left circles around. And by the time you're halfway finished with person one, this guy following around will do you in. Scenarios like that till you finally realize, my God, I got a table in front of me. Why don't I just shove the table into two of them, spread them out? That gives me time. Yeah. So my want you to become a thinking, resourceful martial artist, not just one that's just technically, component or technically functional. Because he knew you can have the best technique, but if your strategy is not functional, you can lose a fight very easy.
Well said.
So we want to give time for Christophe. So
okay, well, I thought
same question.
that maybe you're gonna go into how you were doing things now, like all that. What does that translated to now? Like, what does your training incorporate now? That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the last part of that question.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for Mike, and then followed up with Carl, and followed up with Guru and Asana. Those are the three, I think, major influences in my martial arts career. You learn how to be self-analytical, be purely honest, completely honest with yourself. Okay, these are my strong points. These are my weak points. So if you're in a situation, you're going to be prompted to use your strong points the best you can and to kind of hide your weak points. Okay, so that's the realistic attitude that I carry over in many different things. Because street is not sport, it's survive. So Mike used to always notice one thing about me. I didn't have that killer instinct. Like I said, I wasn't the best sparrer in class. So he used to always tease me, saying, well, Stan, if you can't beat him up, at least beat him off of you. Because he understood that I was so philosophical and technical oriented that I may never develop what you call a good killer instinct. But I use that to my advantage. And that's probably why Christophe, when you talk to me, says I'm sneaky. But it's not so much I'm sneaky, is that I hide what I can do until I can use it and get it done. So.
Well, I think that's the definition of sneaky, Stan. I think that's the definition of sneaky right there. But okay, all right. So I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. So before I trained with Mike Sandlin, I'd done a whole lot of other different martial arts. I had done a version of Kung Fu, and I had done Judo, but there were low-level Judo guys that train, and I had done I did Pukang, Tang Soo Do, and then I had done Taekwondo and some other stuff, but I don't even consider that really, and I've done a little bit of boxing, but not good trainers either, but I don't really count any of that before Mike, because Mike was the big juncture, because I was always looking for that. So my training with Mike is insanely different than Ken's. It's the exact opposite of Ken's. And like I said before, Mike misled me on a lot of stuff because he made me think that you two had trained the same way that I did, and that I was faulty, because I trained with Mike Sandlin one-on-one 4 hours a day, and sometimes more, 6 days a week for over a year. And during that period of time, there were some guys who were that were students who started before I did, but then they dropped off for one reason or the other. And then he tried to get some other people, but they couldn't cut it. And something I think we talked about before, but it needs to be reiterated, that you had to be selected by Mike. You had to be trained by Mike. You couldn't show up and say, I want to train. He put you through a lot of testing. It was character testing, and character testing revolved around physical, mental, and emotional aspects. And then he later would create those tests for you that were physical, mental, and emotional. And one of the things that I had to deal with Mike. I the entire time. So I was dealing with a guy who was fast, was strong. He was lifting. I think he started lifting after he knew you guys. I mean, seriously. And then it was pure one-on-one, and I got a lot of the combat mindset, because something we're missing that we're not saying is that Mike was a Vietnam veteran, and so was Carl. And they came back changed like everybody did. And that's why Mike had no tolerance for not having the combat mindset. And that was vastly different than other people, and they were not talking about it. And Mike was not going to become a victim or be lackadaisical. And you weren't going to be either if you trained with him, because he worked on that quite a bit. And those are things I don't want to talk about right now. I mean, as far as that aspect, because it's in depth. Because it'll slow down the story here. But anyway, so I trained with Mike, and I didn't know how long I was going to be able to stay in that part of the country, because I had moved from California. I moved from Hollywood, actually. I moved from Hollywood, California, to actually Collinsville, Illinois, and then I was able, through an intermediary guy, to basically get an audition. That's what it was, an audition with Mike, and then it led on from there. And then later, I found out about you two. I didn't know about you guys right away. And then, but then he would, after that, he mentioned your names quite a bit. And then I finally met you guys when you had the huge giant seminar at St. Louis University. And that's when I met Dan first time. And we covered part of that story. But anyway, so after that, I didn't know how long I could stick around. And I actually was down in Carbondale. I was in Carbondale, but I was in I was at Edwardsville for a little while. Then I was in Carbondale, and then I left that area. But I stayed in contact with Mike, and that's when I started focusing on professional fighting, because I'm like, I'm going to do something with this. There wasn't MMA or NHB at that time in the United States. You couldn't make money at it, so I went into kickboxing that fit me better. And then from kickboxing, I trained at a boxing gym, so I met all the boxers. So I had boxing trainers, and I saw how that could be adopted into JKD training. And that's something that Bruce liked. Actually, Bruce took a lot of things from boxing, but Bruce wasn't a solid boxer. I mean, he didn't spend a lot of time, and he wasn't trying to become a professional boxer. I was. So there was a lot of things I learned from that. And I had several different boxing trainers, and one was a former top rated guy, Ronnie Warrior Sr., and he clicked with me on the psychology, because his fight style, everybody has a different fight style. His fight style and mine were similar enough for him to understand me psychologically and know how to train me to utilize my fight strategy. And then from him, from Ronnie Warrior, I was self-training basically for kickboxing. And then I had another guy that I started training, and that helped me because I had a partner. And I also had some high-level sparring partners in kickboxing for the United States at the time. For the United States, they weren't up to Dutch standards, but they were definitely for the United States. And so I moved on from that, and I started fighting professionally, and I won some belts and stuff, and it was I was stymied because there were certain promoters who didn't like me, and they didn't want me to beat their guys, so I had to go. I went into professional boxing. People didn't know that I had when I started out, I had a 0-0 record, right? So they would definitely match me against guys who were supposed to beat me, and they didn't realize that I had like 20-something kickboxing fights at the time, so I had ring experience, and I started winning. I think I'm 11-2-1 in professional boxing. Not all of my fights are on the Box Rec. If people want to look it up, you can see it. And I fought at a lot of different weights too. I fought a super middleweight in boxing, through light heavyweight in boxing. In kickboxing, I fought mainly as a light heavyweight. Then later when I came back as a heavyweight. But anyway, so I did that, and then there's a lot of things. And then after Mike, I started just watching a lot of people, seeing things. I ran into some other JKD guys that you guys know that you'd seen, and they were actually below me. They had started after me and stuff, and I looked at what they were doing. It wasn't that great. And when I was kickboxing, I ran into a Thai guy from Thailand who, although he hadn't been a fighter really, he knew the training because everybody does in Thailand. It's a national sport. So he had a gym, and he turned out guys who were pretty good, and he was also a promoter. So I trained with him a couple times because that was in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, and Tong Trithera. And other guys like Ike Stafford was there. Ike Stafford was known in Japan quite a bit. And then I was in shootboxing. I was actually rated #1 in the world in my weight division in shootboxing for a couple years. But anyway, so then skip ahead because there's too much stuff. I'm doing my own things. I'm training or whatever. And then I finally have the way to meet Gene LaBelle, and because Bruce Lee training with Gene LaBelle, and I'm like, I'm going to go to all these people that Bruce was involved with. So I met Gene LaBelle, and I got to train with Gene LaBelle. He likes me, and I was able to train with him one-on-one, and I was able to take some of my guys to Gene LaBelle. He liked everybody, so I trained with him, and then I also trained with, as far as wrestlers go, I trained with gold medalist Kenny Monday and some other Olympic level guys that were on, Chris Barnes, who was an alternate on the Olympic team, and because I was supposed to fight in the UFC way back, I was supposed to fight Kevin Jackson actually. Well, that wasn't who I was scheduled to, but that's what they moved it to. And then from there, then I went. I took a hiatus. I quit professional fighting. Then when I went back to professional fighting, I was in Europe, and then I went to Dutch trainers, and what a gigantic leap! Like the zenith of stand-up striking training are the Dutch, without a doubt. That's why every K1 champion except 2 were Dutch and trained in Holland. So that was incredible. And then I was in Thailand. I still do live in Thailand and Cambodia and Thailand. And then I trained and fought 20 times in Thailand, once on national TV there. And Thai training is low. It's not. It's just it's a myth. They're nowhere near, especially for a heavyweight. They don't know what they're doing. Seriously. Then in Cambodia, I trained with a South African well-known trainer who lived in Cambodia at the time, Paddy Carson. And so from all that, then I fought and I fought in weird places. I fought in Holland. I fought in Uzbekistan. I fought a bunch of weird places. And then then I stopped again because I really I didn't have the desire anymore. But I'd fought for a long time. Actually, I probably fought 20-some fights that I shouldn't have fought because I really didn't care at that point. And the training is rough in Thailand. So that's where I was on that stuff. And but I'd been training people. That's kind of the professional career. But I, had actual fights and real fights, like 50 or so. I'd done security work. I'd done close protection work. I trained military guys and contractors starting back in the mid-90s. And so I really like that the best because I don't have any limitations when I train military guys. I don't have to worry about constraints or anything. And I started getting known as a knife guy. That's too long of a story to get into, but that's where I'm at now. What we do, my training is kind of modularized around what I train military or contractors with. And I also had a big input too with John Saylor, who was the former United States Olympic judo coach. And he and I worked together for many years, and we fight each other all the time. But that's where what my background story is with this. And then I wanted to always reunite with you guys because I always thought we have this shared experience of having to live through Mike Sandlin's attacks, that we should do something. And then I found out Mike lied to me because I went through and the thing that he was telling me all the time was nobody under 30 had ever made it. Made it meant getting through being trained with him and hitting instructor level. And he said, no one's ever going to do it. I was way under 30 when I did it. And he was always shocked and amazed. And he kept waiting for me to mess up, so I had that pressure on me all the time. And then he made me think that you guys had gone through in a year. And then I find out it was many years, So then it turned out I did it faster because of the intensive time that I did it. So he misled me to try to put more stress on me, I think, knowing Mike the way that I did, because I spent so much time with him during that time period. And he's incredibly influential. And the whole thing that you were talking about, Stan, about the emotional content in a fight, or the emotional aspect, is the most crucial aspect of a fight. And that Mike knew that, and he worked on that, and he talked about that, and nobody else does, not really. And that's one of the things I do is my training counts on people being scared and fear, and I try to get them to that, because one of the things we know is state-dependent learning. You will be able to do and perform only in the same state that you learned it in. So that's why with astronauts, they put them in crisis situations, because if they just do lackadaisical, it's all nice and great here, they can't handle a crisis situation. Same thing, the reason why military has so many submarines, have so many different crash programs. What if this happens? What if this? How do we act? What do we do? So Mike did that with me, and that's something I continue and I harp on, because I don't care what you can do in a well-lit, friendly, everybody in the dojo, indoor, weather is good, you're wearing clothes you like to wear, you're not carrying any other weight, you've eaten, all these things are on your side. Try a third world hellhole and you're in mud and the whole damn village is out to kill you, for example. And let's see, and you haven't slept in 3 days. Let's see how well you perform then. Because if you haven't been put in that, then you'll never know if you can perform, and it's too late then. But anyway, those are so many different topics that are so profound that that's all I'm really going to say, just going to gloss over them. But that kind of takes us right back to Ken, I think, and Ken's feelings about it all. We got three different stories, really, right? We got three big, gigantic, different stories of where we started with Mike and then where we ended up.
Yeah, and this is good, because now I think folks have some idea that we came from a similar route, but the conceptual framework was the same. But what we've done with it has been extremely different, with certain cross currents of similarities. One thing we all had in common is that Mike stressed training through fear and very uncomfortable situations. And he approached that a little differently with each one of us, but he did do the same thing, and it's had its effect on every one of us in its own way. And I think this is the strength of this art, and I think it's particularly the strength of Mike's branch of this art, because as both of you guys just said, he took that element, the dealing with fear, how to control your own emotions under fear, and putting you in situations to feel that and to figure out how to get out of it, how to work through it. So that's the common theme. But how we've approached that and what we've each done with it and the way we train people, there are similarities and there are dramatic differences. But what people need to understand is that's the strength of this art. We're not trying to line up a bunch of guys and make their front kick all look like the other guy's front kick, and to train in such a way that we do technique A goes to technique B goes to technique C. No. This is the thinking man's art. Combat JKD is for people who can think, people who can problem solve, and who immerse themselves and their students in a process whereby they learn to do the same thing. Because then this stuff, even though combat's the base, dealing with fear and violence is the base, it goes way beyond that, because learning how to deal with conflict is learning how to deal with conflict. Look at how many different ways there are to be afraid. The extreme version is a guy in front of you with a knife. 3 guys surrounding you with knives or weapons, 4 guys, whatever. But fear is fear. There's also the fear of losing your job. There's a fear of losing your relationship. Dealing with fear is dealing with fear, period. And that's gotten me through so much stuff. I could go on for hours, and we've talked about this before. That's the thing that's super extra unique about this as well, that goes beyond just the combat aspect, okay? So I think we've done a pretty good job of giving people an idea of how this has affected the 3 of us, how the 3 of us are still at it, and what they could gain by coming and spending time with us in November right? And going from the senior most guy, Stan, to the next guy, me, to Christophe, and seeing how the three of us express what we've learned and how the three of us teach what we've learned and give three perspectives of the same conceptual framework. I don't know of anybody else who's ever done this in any art that I know of, where you get three instructors spread out over a few decades with their own backgrounds, their own interpretations, and their own experiences, and get to see that and get to learn that, see the connections, and see how to apply that to yourself. This will be an epic event.
You kind of leaked something right there. I guess
I leaked.
We might. I guess we're gonna have to make it official then, right? So it's locked in stone now, and we can definitely say to everybody, we have a incredible event planned in St. Louis. It will be held in St. Louis. The actual address and stuff we'll give out later, but you start looking it down because the dates are set, and that will be November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, I believe, of November, and that starts it's a Friday night. We're just going to do a 2-hour thing, and that'll be open to people who just want to come for that. They can come for that, or we offer a whole weekend, which is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we're also, because we know some people want to come to this, we're going to make it available that you can come on just Saturday or Sunday, or you can do 2 days, or you can do 3 days. It's all, but we're going to give preference, of course, to people who want to do the entire 3 days. And when this opens up, you better grab your spot, because it's going to be. It's like we're saying, St. Louis may never recover again, because it's where it started. It's where we were all trained in East St. Louis, basically, and parts of St. Louis, also South St. Louis. I trained in quite a bit, and so this is a way to bring it back. It's a rebirth of Combat JKD. I think is really the best term. It's a rebirth of Combat JKD. You're getting the 3 guys that Mike Sandlin trained, that are out where the combat branch people wanted to know about. Now you know about it. Now's your chance to be able to meet us, be able to see it, be able to train. And really, I'm not even certain how it's gonna what each person's gonna do, other than myself. I know what I'm gonna teach there, but it's gonna be cool in that respect, because you're gonna start out with Stan, like he's saying, because we're gonna give you a chronological education. You're gonna get Stan doing it, and then you're gonna have Ken, and then I'm gonna do it, and then because we'll do 6 hours a day, and then it'll be back to Stan, and then back to Ken, and then back to me. And if your brain is still there at the end of that, the next day will be the same structure again. And this won't be this will be synergetic, meaning that it's gonna be live and growing and evolving during that weekend. Because we'll have an idea what we're going to set out to do, but once Stan starts, it's going to influence Ken, and then after Ken gets done, that's going to influence where I go with it too. And then when Stan comes back, he'll have seen the whole 3 hours before that, and then it'll start again. So this is really, I'm pumped up. I mean, if I were learning, I'd want to be at this event. So and basically, I got to say that our point of contact, the guy who will be running all the logistics, will be Ken. So Ken will be doing that. So a lot of people want to contact me. I'm going to have to send you to Ken, because on this, because St. Louis is where he lives, and he's done this, and he knows what he's doing. So that'll be it. But I think I want to get feedback on Stan's ideas about this event, the rebirth of Combat JKD. Stan, I mean, what was I accurate in saying that it's going to be an evolving, growing event that we can?
Yes, exactly. Because the way Mike started his teaching, it was very, what I would call, unplanned. It was spontaneous. It was organic. I mean, he grew as he taught, and he learned and taught together. So he was constantly growing, constantly evolving. Anything that he saw that he thought that could be instrumental in his growth, he wasn't prejudiced in any way. He would actually adapt it. This is why he sent Carl, after Bruce published, I believe it was 2 articles in Black Belt magazine at that time. We knew something hot was going on in California. Okay, so Mike wanted to go, but he said due to his schedule he can't make it. So he sent Carl James to go out, learn what Bruce was teaching, and then bring it back, because he saw that there was a parallel in terms of realistic street fighting that Bruce was promoting, and also what he was promoting. So he saw that kinship. So when Carl brought it back, I saw Mike's transition from using the Kung Fu system. It's not even a system, but it was a methodology that Mike had adapted to street fighting, and seeing his transition to bringing back the Jun Fan techniques, a way of training that Carl brought back from training with Guru Dan Asano in California. So all of it was an organic process. So to see what's going to happen when the three of us get together this November, again, it's not going to change. It's going to stay on this evolutionary, path. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a path of learning. It's going to be also a path of sharing. So this is why we're all excited about this.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to make sure you guys realize too, as far as, when we start to register for this event is, keep in mind that, I mean, when we even do our little things that we usually do around here, with usually just a few weeks notice, locally, it's easy for us to pull in 40 guys. I mean, when Stan started teaching again a few years back, I set something up with him, and there was just the two of us were sharing something like this just for a few hours, and we had 42 people show up for that. So you guys got to realize, I mean, the venue that we're planning on doing this in, and I'm going to do the final stages of this on Sunday, will hold about, on the training floor, around 100 people. And we could easily pull 40 or, well, we add Stan's students to my students and our other workshop students. That could be half the game right there. Plus, Christophe already has guys that he works with when he's here in the States that he's drawn from. So I wouldn't fool around. I mean, I would get going to register for this thing. But between now and our next talk, we'll get something up that talks about the price structure for you guys. And I'll get the whole PayPal deal set up here pretty soon so that we can start taking money in for this. We'll give you more details on that. We won't go into all that tonight, but just to let you know, we're about to set that up because I would get registered. Now, obviously, and I want to really say this to make sure everybody realizes, if something happened and somehow this thing couldn't happen, we'll have this thing set up for PayPal so you would get refunded immediately, Now, once we do all this, if you back out, that's another story because we've got overhead to cover. We've got travel expenses to cover, and that'll be another story. But if for some reason we had to cancel this, of course, everyone gets every dime back. I think it's always important to tell people we have high integrity. A lot of people know us and know that we're that way. We would never hold your money. But that being said, Christophe, what do you got, man? Anything else to wrap this up?
Well, I just want to reiterate that this is going to be incredibly unique, and that's something that we worked on now for. Well, I worked on it in my mind for years, and then when you and I started talking, and you and I we were kind of like, have you ever thought about? Have you ever? And we were both on the same wavelength, and then we're like, well, we got to get Stan back. We got to get. He's like, I think I can get Stan back. So then once you start talking to Stan, and Stan's very receptive to this idea, it's got to happen, because if we don't do it, it's never going to happen. Number one. Number two, we owe it to history and the legacy of everybody involved to do it. And 3 or 4, whatever this number is, it's just something cool. I mean, it's more than just training, because that's the thing. It's not just an antiseptic training where you go train. No, you're going to meet incredible people, like-minded people, and you're getting 3 different personalities that you can tell that Stan's pretty laid back, and that Ken, you guys, he's different than that, and I'm probably far way more on the extreme. So you're getting that, and then some of the guys that we should mention that we have some honorary guests people planned. We're not going to release any names yet, but we have other people, dignitaries or whatever, VIPs planned to be at this event. So you don't want to miss it, because this is going to be really cool. And I don't want to miss it, but I just wanted to say that aspect of that. You got to really think of the rarity of this. Would you go to James Coburn and with Bruce Lee and Dan Inosanto? Or Taki Kimura, I mean, this is the sort of level of thing that this is going to be. And anyway, But we'll definitely give everybody more information. I just want to recap though right here at the end, so people, if they get to just sifting through the entire thing, that we have planned this for 2019, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in St. Louis. That this will be the three Musketeers, more or less, of Combat JKD with the rebirth of JKD, and it's going to be massively cool, massively great weekend. And we'll get more information to everybody on everything, as Ken said, and Ken O'Neill of O'Neill JKD, which is on Facebook, O'Neill JKD. You will be the point of contact, and he'll be getting in, and you can get more information through me, but I'm going to send you to Ken either way. And I just got to say I got to say my websites, fluentfighting.com, and combat-judo.com. Those are my two major sites. I got more, but those are my two major sites. And I'm on Facebook, and I have Facebook groups and pages. You can get on those and follow, like, and subscribe, and also share this video, people, because you may know some people who are interested in this that we don't know, and that you'll be doing them a service if you pass it along to them, because we know there's a lot of JKD people who've trained or influenced, or former students, or people who are just starting out now. This is something they want to be part of. But anyway, I think, does that hit it all? Is that good?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to throw in, and we probably should make a little more clear, is on that Friday night for a couple hours, that's a totally appropriate thing to attend, even if you don't want to do the training. If you're just a guy that maybe used to train, but you don't anymore, but you find this really fascinating, because we have guys that follow us now who are, I would say, are in that category, and there'll be a fee for that night, but it won't be anything crazy. And some of you guys may come to that to meet us and hear us talk more about this, and then decide that you want to upgrade and take a day or two. So you'll have that opportunity as long as we're not filled. But I'm pretty sure, I mean, like I said, just from our local people, plus Christophe students who are already committing, my students, Stan's got students, that we're probably going to hit 50 people registered for this thing well within a couple of weeks. So I wouldn't hesitate, because really, I've talked to the guys, and I'll tell you more about the place we're going to do this, which is really cool. I just have to firm up a couple of little special details. It's set, but we've got to firm up a couple of details. The place is the coolest venue. It's gorgeous. We just got Stan all set up recently. He's starting to teach classes in there now, and it's just a phenomenally aesthetic. It's not like in a basketball gym. Wait till you see this place. I'll get into more of that, because I'm going to be doing a talk with the guys that run the place. I'm going to say the place for now, that we're going to be using, and we'll connect that to some of our talks too, so that you can meet our hosts. They are a story unto themselves, and they're very open-minded fellows who do something very different than what the three of us do, but they're real open, and they're great about sharing their space. We want to give them some kudos for welcoming us to use their place. But like I said, they say max capacity, 100 people on the floor there. So you guys are going to want to register and get your money in fast. I guess we've talked your ears off enough. You guys have any final words?
I'm okay. I'm good.
All right.
Well, yeah, we'll have to force Stan to talk at the end. So anyway, yeah, that's it, people. Guys, hang on here after we go off the air here. So I'm just going to wrap it up and just say the last thing is November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Mark it on your calendar. You got plenty of time. No reasons to excuse yourself from it. If you're on the fence, just come Friday night. We'll see if we can fit you in for Saturday and Sunday, or just come for Friday night, as Ken was saying. But don't hesitate. Don't mess around. When he gets the registration up, jump on it, because that's going to be, because we'll honor the first come first serve idea. But anyway, so we'll talk to you soon about more of this and some other stories from the good old days. And thanks for listening, and share, like, subscribe, and tell other people. All right, we'll see you guys.
Aloha. Hang loose.